That was a bummer. Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. It's time to start the end of the year videos at the end of January. In today's video, we are going to be discussing my least favorite or most disappointing reads of 2019. I wouldn't say that any of these books are like inherently bad, poorly written, offensive, anything of that nature. They were just all books that I was really looking forward to and was unfortunately not impressed by. If these are any of your favorites, I'm not saying that they can't be your favorites. Some of my favorite books are very much well hated across BookTube. They're just not things that worked for me personally. Without further ado, let's get into my most disappointing reads 2019. First one here in my pile is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. This is the first book in the Nikolai duology. It is a continuation of the Grishaverse. It takes place after the events of both the Grishaverse and Six of Crows. This is supposed to be a novel following Nikolai, who is a very beloved character from the original trilogy and who I really enjoyed. He's not like my favorite character of all time, but I really liked his character and I was excited to explore him a little bit more in depth. It's just not Nikolai's story. I really feel like Nina was plopped in here just as like a fan servicey type of addition. I don't feel like she added anything really to the story. I was very bored by her, whereas conversely, when I read Six of Crows, I loved Nina. She was one of my favorite characters. So to see her in here be so disappointing and so lackluster, she just didn't feel like Nina whatsoever, and that was really disappointing for me. And then also just the fact that Nikolai is almost absent from his own series. This really is Zoya's story, and I really love Zoya, and I had no problem with that. I just wanted it to like, it was gonna be Zoya's story, I wanted it to be Zoya's story, and the ending was just so recycled, and it's like, we'd been there, we've done that, we've dealt with that, let's move on. It didn't fulfill me in any capacity, so unfortunately, it made my least favorites of the year list. Next on my list here is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh, which was an arc I received from Penguin Teen, and I was really looking forward to this as well. It's pitched as a vampire YA novel, like what's going to bring vampires back to the forefront of pop culture, and I really disagree with that marketing tactic because I went into this thinking I was gonna have a vampiric circa 2011, 2009, 2006, like, you know, when it was at its heyday. And it's just not that at all. It is really something very different. Like, vampires don't come in into the last 50 pages and they're mentioned like in the synopsis and it's marketed that way. So I was waiting 400 pages for a plot point that felt like it was never coming. I really hate when books are marketed on like the last hinged plot point. Like, come on. The last thing that happens in the book should not be how you market the book. And there just wasn't enough vampires in here. I also didn't buy into the love story enough. I didn't really care for the mystery. I've read so many things that are so much better. I just like didn't care for a lot of this book. The ending I really enjoyed and is the only reason why I'm going to dabble my toes into the sequel. 85% of this book I could have done without, and I was so disappointed by it. Next on my list here is another arc I received from Penguin Teen, and that was Frankly in Love by David Yoon. Now this is something that's not really in my typical wheelhouse. It's YA contemporary, which I am really selective about my YA contemporaries. It didn't make its mark for me. I really have a hard time with YAs that are like this, and had I known what it was going into it, had I done some more research, I would have known that I wasn't going, like it would be obvious that this wasn't a book for me. I don't care for the main character. He is so pretentious. He reminds me a lot of like John Green characters, which were fine when I was 10 years younger. If I had read this as a teen, I probably really would have enjoyed it, but as an adult, it just missed all of its marks for me. I think it's great that we're getting these kinds of books written by diverse authors. I really liked that part of it, but I didn't like the romance. I didn't like the 1,000 other plots that were happening in this book at the same time. And I was bored, and I didn't like Frank. And since it's told from Frank and it is Frank's story, it's kind of important to like him, and I didn't. Next one is also an arc, and I did not have a good time with this book either. And that was Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. This had the potential to be a favorite, and then it took a lot of directions of things that I just don't care for. I'm not a big fan of speculative contemporary. I either want it to be fantastical or I want it to be contemporary. Like the mixing and the blending of the two in this way doesn't work for me. Like I don't mind urban fantasy, that's fine, but like the speculative fabulism type of novels, they're just not my jive. And this kind of had that speculative twist to it and I didn't like it. Things that were introduced in the end of the novel that I felt like should have been introduced a lot sooner. Like the pace of the majority of the book was fairly slow and then like everything happened at the end and it was things that I had not seen coming. I mean, maybe if I was a more observant, engaged reader, I would have seen it coming. It had some things in it at the end that I really dislike about like the horror genre. This isn't really a horror book. I mean, it might like toe that line depending on what you consider horror. I didn't like it. It made me really upset and wasn't a fan. And the next two we're gonna kind of talk about together because they're by the same author and I should have known after I read the first one that I shouldn't have read the second one, and that is I Know You Know by Gillian Macmillan and The Nanny by Gillian Macmillan. Both of these books I despised. I love a good mystery thriller. I don't think these are good mystery thrillers. I Know You Know is a podcast mystery thriller where there is a crime that happens and then one of the friends of the person who dies like grows up to make this podcast to try to figure out what happened to his friend who died as a child, and there's a podcast format. I listened to an audiobook. I thought that'd be cool for the podcast element. It wasn't. This one I read as an e-arc from NetGalley, and both of these books I can't tell you the plots. I know that this one follows three boys. One of them dies, two of them die. One survives because he runs the podcast. This one is about a kid who has a nanny that goes missing. And then she grows up and she has to go back to her family manor and she thinks her nanny is back. Both of these are incredibly forgettable. I can't tell you detailed synopses for either of these. I can't tell you the twists or endings for either of these. This one had a villain monologue in it, first of all, like actually sat down, orchestrated a dinner where everyone was invited and they sat down and they ate food and they knew that the person at the head of the table was the villain, but they had to pretend that they were all, you know, friends, and then they had to listen to the villain monologue, which is just something I really don't like. I don't like the way that she reveals her mysteries. The reveals are odd and they feel contrived and they don't feel natural and I don't like them and I didn't like either of these. I will not be reading any more Gillian Macmillan. Let's do my other mystery thriller that I really didn't like this year. That was Her Pretty Face by Robin Harding. This one I also listened to an audiobook, and first of all, there are 3 different points of view happening and 2 different timelines happening. So there's a lot going on and it makes this book there's just too much. There is too many things happening. You have like the main, I guess, timeline where the mother, Frances, of a private school child, something strange to another student in school and they become shunned, and the only person who's willing to be her friend is this woman named Kate, who is like beautiful and perfect, and Kate's son is best friends with Frances's son. So like that's all happening, but then Kate has this mysterious backstory, and then we are also following Kate's daughter, who is making terrible decisions, and Kate's a terrible mother to her daughter. Her daughter is like 15, can't even drive, and the things that she is doing, and then we have this past timeline that we're following this boy whose older sister was like abducted and murdered, and we're following the trial of his older sister, and somehow that has to do with like the present timeline. Just too many things going on that when all the connections came together, it just felt very like overlord villain-y. Like you could feel that the author was moving and planting these things and was like purposely drawing your attention here and there and stuff. And it just felt really, really contrived. Nothing really felt natural. Nothing really felt seamless. Don't know that I would never read from Robin Harding again, but I would be very wary to read from her again. Next book on my list, and the second to last book on my list, is Wild Card by Marie Lu. This is the sequel to Warcross, and it's her most recent young adult science fiction series. I loved Legend. Legend is one of my all-time favorite dystopian trilogies, and this takes place in the same universe as Legend. I more or less enjoyed Warcross. It was a fun time, it was enjoyable. It wasn't as good as Legend, but like I had a good time. This was not. I do not remember what happens in any of this book. I think I even said that in my review when I was doing this in my wrap-up. I think I had said I was going to put it down and never think about it again, and I did. I knew that it was very forgettable and that the ending didn't stick with me. Like, the ending of Legend is so memorable and it's so impactful, and it made me so upset, and it like hit all these feelings for me. And this was forgettable in every single way. Like, I don't remember the ending. I don't remember how I felt about it. I don't remember how I felt about the characters. I don't remember anything that happens in this book. And that's just really unfortunate because I loved Marie Lu's previous series. I just don't know if I've outgrown her, if I've outgrown her writing style, but Legend's really been the only thing that I've loved, and everything else has been forgettable and not enjoyable. And then the final book that I have from my list here for 2019 is 99% Mine by Sally Thorne. It's not that I particularly disliked anything while reading it, but there were things that I thought were odd while reading it, and then once the discussion for the book started happening on Twitter and on YouTube, I was like, oh, that's what felt weird and off kilter. Darcy is just a lot. She is a messy, sloppy human, and that's fine. We are all messy, sloppy people, but she just wasn't an enjoyable, messy person to read about. She just like felt really unstable a lot of the time. Like, the scene that sticks out the most for me in this book is her ripping cabinet doors off of the cabinets in a fit of rage. And I just feel like that's something that like not a person with normal anger does. So she just felt really unstable. She also has like a heart condition in the book that's really unmanaged. Dialogue, the way that's written for her character, makes her feel really like out of tune with reality. Like, she'd be thinking something and then just like spurt out dialogue without really any good transition between the two. It wasn't structured well. The dialogue was all weird and funky for everybody, and like the transitions around the dialogue and like the exposition were clunky and they were weird. I was just missing pieces of the story. Like, I would read something and be like, is that out loud? Is that in her head? Like, what is she referencing? What are they talking about? Where did this even come from? I felt like her obsession with Tom was weird. She sticks out in my mind so vividly as just being a character that I really did not like reading from this year. Was so underwhelmed with this, which is so sad because The Hating Game is so good, and it's just how the same author can write something so bad and so different. Like, they don't even feel like it's written by the same person. It's like, so that is it. Those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books in 2019 that I was most let down by. And also kind of the reason for a lot of my reading slumps last year. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will talk to you very soon. Bye.